The Breakdown, POLI-TRICKS, with Mercer Prescott and his band of eclectic cronies, telling you what you need to know regarding politics, breaking it down, POLI-TRICKS. And welcome to another episode of POLI-TRICKS with Mercer Prescott and his band of eclectic cronies. I'm Mr. Mayhem Trump, and today we have Mercer Prescott bringing you the news you can use so you don't lose when it comes to this game called POLI-TRICKS. Tricks.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Captain. So, all right, we're going to jump right into it. We got a lot to talk about today. I gotta tell you something. I'm just gonna jump right into this part. I had a lot of my friends who were Trump supporters drop me because I was constantly dumping on Trump and calling them rubes for supporting Trump, because basically supporting Trump didn't really get them anything at all. You know, at least the sycophants got book deals, but they didn't get anything at all. And I found out. I think I found this out yesterday, that Donald Trump made a picture book. So it's basically like a coffee table book, and it's full of pictures that you probably could have clipped from the internet. And then he makes captions on them. Like he'll have a picture of like Nancy Pelosi, and it'd be like, that's why I call her Crazy Nancy or something stupid like that. He charges $75 for the book. And then if you want an autographed copy, he'll charge you $230. So far, those books have sold out, and so far he's made $20 million in revenue off that picture book. We always joke when you have a president who's not so smart that his presidential library is either going to just be filled with like children's toys or is just going to be filled with picture books. And it looks like he's starting early on the picture books. And the fact that rubes would pay $75 for a picture book of stuff that they could have just clipped from the internet themselves, they're the epitome of rubes. I guess I'm on the mind of, if you've made $1 billion, I mean, Trump's not really a billionaire. He's like a fake billionaire. But if you're a billionaire, there's got to be a point in time where you're just like, hey, I don't need to make any more money, because you can't even count to $1 billion in your lifetime. So the whole notion of, I'm a billionaire, but I'm going to keep taking money from my constituents is ridiculous. And all you have to show for it is a lousy, stinking picture book of stuff that you could have clipped from the internet yourself. So enjoy your picture book, rubes. I mean, half these people don't even have coffee tables to put it on. So, I mean, hey, you do you. Enjoy. So. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of the day. Let's talk about student loan crisis, because it is a crisis. It's an absolute crisis. This one of my friends posted a tweet, a string of tweets, right? Someone talking about Americans and their empathy. So he said, I heard a thing on a podcast this weekend how Americans are really good at acute compassion, but pretty bad at chronic empathy. It says, we, without question, will haul strangers out of a raging flood, give blood, give food, give shelter, but we are lousy at legislating safe, sustainable communities. We're lousy at elder care, at accessible streets and buildings. It is the long-term work that makes the disasters less damaging, but we don't want to give to the needy. We want to save the endangered. We don't like being care workers. We want to be heroes. The world does not need more heroes. We need more care. Now, all these people who have student loans, myself included, we're kind of trapped in a cycle. Now, there are people who pay off their student loans, but it really sets them back, because you could pay your student loans off one of two ways. Number one, pay like $800 a month. Some people pay maybe like $500 or $600 a month. Some people pay $700, $800, $900 a month, depending on how much in student loans you have. And basically, it'll set you back. Or you could do income repayment, which basically means if you do income repayment, your payments are connected to your salary, but you will never get past the interest. So you're going to end up paying more. Like you'll owe more than what you started with because you won't get past the interest. And there are some people who are still paying $700 a month who can't get past the interest because they owe more than $150,000, $160,000 in loans. So this whole notion of, people will talk about personal responsibility. I'll talk about more about that in a moment. There was a case I read this out of Newsweek, right? And I apologize if the sound comes on. I know sometimes Newsweek, they'll play like videos, and the videos will sometimes come on automatically. Let me pause this. Let me see if that'll work. But this is from Newsweek. President Joe Biden's administration is facing renewed pressure. And actually, hold on, let me move this over so I could see here. So it's facing renewed pressure to act on student loan debt after the Department of Education on Friday announced it would drop an appeal in a high-profile bankruptcy case involving student debt. Though the move has been welcomed, advocates have long called on President Biden to do more, and some senior Democrats argue he has the power to cancel up to $50,000 in student debt per borrower by executive action. A Delaware bankruptcy judge discharged almost $100,000 in student debt held by Ryan Wolfson, an epileptic 35-year-old graduate of Penn State, in a ruling on January 14th. Judge Laurie Selber Silverstein ruled that the debt imposed an undue hardship on Wolfson. In order to discharge student debt as part of a bankruptcy proceeding, the borrower must engage in an adversary proceeding against the student loan lenders and show that repayment imposes an undue hardship on them. On January 28th, the Department of Justice filed a notice of appeal on behalf of Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona. Following media coverage and some degree of public outcry, the department announced on Friday that it would withdraw the appeal and carry out a review of its bankruptcy policies. Remember, Joe Biden is one of the architects of the bankruptcy bill, right? Because of the bankruptcy bill, you cannot discharge student loans on you can't file for bankruptcy and discharge your student loans. And thanks to Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, in one of his famous compromises, you can't if you get Social Security and you default on your loans, they can garnish your Social Security. Before, it was illegal to do that. So thanks, Democrats. So basically, this guy, he suffers from epilepsy, so he can't drive because he has seizures. So if he has a seizure when he's driving, he could, kill someone or even kill himself. So basically, he had these, $100,000 in student loans. He filed and they ruled in his favor, but the Justice Department filed an appeal. Now, remember one thing. Joe Biden is all about the corporations. Joe Biden is not about us. So get that notion out of your head. We voted for him because he's not Trump. That's all there is to it. At least when we voted for Obama, we thought he was going to do something. We didn't really expect much out of Joe Biden, but you figure he wants to get reelected, so he needs to do the bare minimum. And he's not even doing the bare minimum. So Chuck Schumer came out and said, yeah, Joe Biden should erase $50,000 worth of student debt from each borrower. Now, if he were to do that tomorrow, right, that means that 36 million people would be debt-free. And they could participate in the economy, right? Now, when I say participate in the economy, that means that they could buy houses. That means that they could buy cars. That means that they could buy, stuff, and participate in the economy. Nancy Pelosi defended stock trading by members of Congress because she said that they deserve to participate in the economy. Here's one thing that they have that we don't have: money. If you were in Congress, you earn at least $100,000 a year. I forget the exact salary of congressmen and senators and stuff like that, but they earn like $100,000 a year. So the average, we talked about that last week and even the week before. Like the median salary in this country, I think, is like $30,000. So this whole notion that you can get this job, you get all these student loans and then you barely make any money, how you gonna pay them off? And then you're eating all that interest, how you gonna pay it off? The New York Post, I don't remember if it was the Times or the Post, more than likely the Post, because they write drivel like this. They wrote an article saying that people like AOC and Rashida Tlaib have an agenda because guess what? They have student loans and they only want to have Biden erase student loans so they can get their student loans forgiven. Here's the thing about that, okay? Don't take my word for this. Look it up on Google. Find out how many Americans own stocks. And then find out how many Americans have student loan debt. So yeah, maybe AOC does want her student loans taken care of. But so do about, 80 million other people. So yeah, if she got her student loans erased, so what? Everybody else will too. How many people really own stocks? No, you know what? Better question. How many people own stocks where they have portfolios, where they could just make deals just like that? I think I mentioned a couple of weeks back, I have a friend of mine I went to high school with. He trades stocks, and he said he's even made, a couple $100,000 off of stocks. But that's after decades of very careful trading to get a couple $100,000 out of his stocks. Nancy Pelosi's husband made one stock trade back in either October or November. That one stock trade, $5 million. But Nancy Pelosi feels that these people should have the right to participate in the economy. But if you have student loans, you don't have the right to participate in the economy. So you got to pay those student loans off because you have to have personal responsibility. Yeah, okay. Tell you what, Nancy, you could take your personal responsibility and shove it up your wrinkled ass. How about that? Someone had a tweet the other day. Actually, it was on Instagram. It says, my daughter was just offered a teaching position at $16.25 per hour. She has 2 master's degrees in education. That's $32,000 annually. No wonder they can't find good teachers. She was making $55,000 as a bartender. She said, our priorities are fucked up. That is a true statement right there. There was also another tweet. I didn't get a chance to pull it, but of a guy who was saying that he pays, like $600-700 a month in student loans. And now after the $60,000 that he's paid in student loans, only $2,000 of that went to his principal. All the rest of that went to interest. So you can't really beat the interest. I've been paying off my student loans for almost 5 years now. I owe more money than when I started. So this is basically just a long-term payday loan. And yes, some people are able to pay off their student loans, right? And that's fine. But they probably got a job that allowed them to pay it off. Maybe you're an engineer. Like if you're an engineer, those jobs start, I just pulled engineer out of my ass when I was writing this morning. But you figure like this, if you were an engineer, you probably start at, depending on what kind of engineer you are, you're probably starting at least $50,000 or $60,000. A lot of teaching jobs in the US, they start at like $35,000 starting. So even if you have one master's degree to pay off, that's going to be a lot of money. I remember I play Borderlands 3, one of my favorite games. As a matter of fact, Tiny Tina, the side game comes out next month. But there's, they have characters, they have like funny sayings, and they have one who's a doctor, but he doesn't have a medical license. And his favorites, like when you go to his vending machine, he always says something funny. And he says, other doctors have fancy degrees to pay off, but I pass those savings on to you. Because you don't need a pay off a medical degree if you practice medicine without a license. Unfortunately, you can't be a teacher without a license. My friend is a teacher, and he has to get recertified every few years, and he has to pay to be recertified. So it's not like, I get recertified, and then you just take a test. He's got to pay a fee to get recertified. So. And even if, Joe Biden tried to skimp out and say $10,000, instead of the $50,000 that Chuck Schumer suggested, even $10,000 would help. Because at least it would help some people get past their interest so they can start paying on their principal. Okay, let's take a look at something here, right? Now, what I did was I punched a lot of these numbers into inflation calculators, okay? And my nephew wants to be a teacher. I have a niece that wants to be a teacher as well. And I joked to them, I'm like, you should be a meth dealer instead. Because number one, you'll be more appreciated. And number two, you make more money than you would teaching. I kid, of course, but am I? Because so many teachers are quitting and going into the private sector because they make more money that way. Because a lot of them aren't even paying off their student loans when you have a starting salary of like $30,000 as a teacher. Now, if you live in some place like Maryland or DC or California, you're going to make more than that. But then again, those places have much higher cost of living. So it just kind of evens out. So I said, I looked it up. A lot of this came from educationdata.org, right? And where did I get the calculator from? I think I wrote that down as well, because there's always all these different calculators that they have for for figuring out inflation. So the cost of public college in 1960, right? In the 1960s, the average cost of tuition and fees at any four-year college increased at an annual rate of 6.1%. Okay, here it is. They gave an example. In a 1963-64 academic year, tuition and fees at the average public four-year university totaled $243 annually in 1960, like 1963-64. $243, right? If you put that in an inflation calculator, that means that every year with tuition and fees, you'd be paying $2,048 per year. So basically in 4 years, that's what the cost, that's less than the cost of the lowest brand of Ford Focus. You could get 4 years of college for that in 1963, adjusted for inflation.
Hell yeah. My grandparents' house, brick house, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, was like 16.5, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So of course a man can support his whole family and do this and do that all by himself. But then again, I think the pay wasn't all that back then either, but still though.
It all depends. I mean, my mom said that my dad used to work 2 jobs and then do odd jobs on the side of that. And then he got into the union. And once he got into the union, he was still working 6 days a week, but he was working for the union. So now at the end, he got himself a nice pension out of it. That's when they had like actual pensions, not this 401k horse shit. So yeah, it all works out in the end. So you didn't really need a college degree to support a family. You could support a family with 7 kids, well, 8 kids, like my dad did, on one job. You can't do that now. Not unless your one job was either, hedge fund manager or Tony Soprano. Okay. So in 1970, the average tuition at a public college was $405 per year. At a private college, that was $1,792 a year. That's average at a private and public college. So back then, if I run that into the inflation calculator, $405 in 1970 was a shade under $3,000, $2,900. So $3,000. And then for a 4-year private college, it was $12,000 a year. All right. Cost of public college in 1980 was $738. So if you adjust that for inflation, that's $2,497. So it's cheaper than it was in the 70s for a 4-year public college. Now, I want you to pay attention to this part. Cost of public college in 1990 went from $738 to $6,562 per year. That's with tuition and fees. Now, adjusted for inflation, that's the shade under $14,000 a year for a public college, average cost for public college, right? So it jumped from $2,400 adjusted for inflation to $14,000 adjusted for inflation in 10 years. Keep in mind, don't forget that 1990 was still 30 years ago. Okay. And the numbers vary, for the newer stuff, but this number came up around the most. For public school in 2020, the average tuition for public school is about $21,000 per year. So 80 grand for 4 years at a public college. And that's in state. That's not even out of state. That's in state. So you're going to saddle some kid with $80,000 in debt and then give him a job that pays $35,000 a year. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he'll get that paid off in no time. All these personal responsibility motherfuckers who were just like, well, he knew what he was getting into. Did he? Did he really? Because if you told him, yeah, they just tell you all the cool things you're going to do when you get to school, all the cool things you're going to do when you get out of school. They don't tell you, hey, yeah, if you're not paying us $800 a month, you're going to be buried in interest. And even then, you're probably still going to be buried in interest. Heavens forbid you want to go to graduate school. You want to get a doctorate. So it's absolute insanity, this whole student loan thing. Let's just say I was president, right? And God didn't make me president for a reason, because he loves for the world to suffer in cycles. Because if I was president, we'd be okay. Of course, they'd have to assassinate me, but at least I'd die for a good cause. Here's a good idea. Why don't we shave $150 billion out of the military? Because they really don't need that money. Most of that money is just wasted on contractors who build tanks that we don't need, who build ships that don't float, who build planes that don't fly, and tanks that rot in a desert. Because the military keeps saying, please stop sending us tanks. We have more tanks than we need. And then they just keep building them more because they have these contracts with all these defense contractors. So let's just save $150 billion out of that whole thing, put it in education. And when I say put in education, not just for teacher salaries, but make it so that all these schools have an even playing field. The problem with schools is that it's tied to property taxes. So if you live in areas where your property is not worth that much and you're not getting that tax revenue, your schools are going to be behind. Or if you live in a state with a bunch of dumbass hicks or a bunch of these militia types who don't believe in education, and every time they need to be a cut, the first thing they cut is education, because they need a populace, as as George Carlin said, they need you just smart enough to run the machinery and dumb enough not to ask questions. No critical thinking skills. Just get in there, helper monkey, and turn those dials. Pull those cranks. Make us money. Take your meager paycheck, go home, and shut the fuck up. That's basically what they want. They don't want somebody who's going to be like, hey. No, they just want you to go in there, do the work, go home, shut your fucking face. Which is why they don't value education, because education in the right circumstance will create critical thinkers. They don't want critical thinkers. They just want drones. So you figure in the 2016 budget, I was trying to find a more recent budget because I kept seeing estimated budgets and I'm like, I don't want estimated budgets. Out of all of our spending, right, out of the $1 trillion that we spend every year in our budget, only 2% went to education in 2016. 2%. That's it. Now, I wasn't really able to find how much other countries spend in education. Figure it like this. America's literacy rate is 88%. Which seems kind of high, right? 88%. That's a lot. Cuba's literacy rate is 99%. And Cuba hasn't seen a new car since like 1963 because of the embargo. They still manage to have socialized medicine and to have a literacy rate of 99%. Whenever there's a pandemic, they send their doctors all across the world to help out. What are our doctors doing? They're selling supplements. They're pushing horse paste. It's absolute insanity. But yeah, trim $150 billion off the budget, put in education, and let's level that playing field so that every school across every state is even. And there's an even chance of getting a great education and going on to do better things. As opposed to getting saddled with student debt like a millstone around your neck, that old-ass jackass Joe Biden, like, oh, no, what would Corn Pop do? Shut the fuck up, Joe, and just sign the fucking executive order, you asshole. It's not that hard. You don't need Congress to approve that. You write the executive order and be done with it. You old-ass piece of shit, you. But before I go off into a cursing tirade, yeah, here's a good idea. Before I go off into a cursing tirade, let's talk about Amir Locke. And I'm not laughing at Amir Locke because he was murdered. I'm just saying it's just a weird segue. Like, yeah, I don't want to be too angry. Let's talk about a man who was murdered by the police. So this is from Georgia Fort's Facebook page. Okay, I'm going to read this off, at what she wrote on her page. So it pretty much sums up a lot of stuff. So I want you to bear with me. This is a little bit of a thick read here. This is Amir Locke, and this is her Facebook page. So she had a picture of Amir Locke up there. He was a son, a brother, a nephew, a cousin, a new business owner, and he wanted to make music like his father, who was known to many in the Twin Cities music community as Little Buddy McLean. Instead, Amir's mother, Karen Wells, and father, Andre Locke, say that their son will never be able to fulfill his dreams because his life was cut short by Minneapolis police officer Mark Hanneman, who fatally shot him during the execution of a search warrant on Wednesday. Amir, however, was not named in that warrant, which was issued by the St. Paul Police Department. And according to St. Paul Police Department, the SPPD, they wanted the MPDs, the Minneapolis Police Department's help in serving the warrant, but never asked them to execute it as a no-knock warrant. Yet, based on footage released by MPD, they did just that, entering Unit 701 at the Bolero Flats with a key without knocking. Within 9 seconds of entering the apartment, Amir was fatally shot. Amir, a licensed gun owner, can be seen in the body cam footage that was released laying on his stomach, wrapped in a blanket that's over his head. His parents say he was a deep sleeper. So at 6:48 a.m., when police came in, it took an officer kicking the couch he's laying on before he even woke up. Amir then gets up, reaches for his gun as he tries to see who is surrounding him. At no time can Amir be seen with his finger on the trigger. In the footage, his finger is clearly seen along the barrel of the gun, with it pointed toward the ground, which gun owner Marquise Armstrong described as the proper way to hold a gun when you are assessing a threat. In that moment, he was fatally shot. Amir's mother and father spoke at a press conference yesterday demanding justice for their son. They've asked that the cop who killed their son be fired and criminally charged. Several community leaders are also asking for the termination of the interim chief of police, Amelia Huffman, and for Mayor Frey to resign. Now, I don't know if they're going to get Mayor Frey to resign, but we'll see what happens to Amelia Huffman, right? This is from the Grio, and hopefully it won't do that goofy thing where, hold on, let me pause this. Sometimes when they have videos, the videos will just pop up, so bear with me here. And let me get to the good part here. I should have put this on my OneNote. But there was the police chief was giving a press conference. And in that press conference, there was an activist who they asked to work on this whole thing, and she stood up and she spoke, right? Let me go back here. Now, this is the police chief talking. She says, if you look at that still image, even though you don't see all the officers, the involved officer was just outside the frame in the direction that the barrel is emerging from the blanket. That's what Huffman, the police chief, told reporters after the body cam video was played. Of course, we all know these events happen very rapidly, and as there's a gun emerging in your direction, you're forced to make a split-second decision about when it's a threat, she added. Those remarks infuriated Levy Armstrong. Hold on. What did they say her first name was? They don't have it in the caption. I apologize. A local leader who city leaders asked to co-chair a working group on community safety earlier this year. She's lived in the Twin Cities regions for years and witnessed firsthand investigations into the police killings of Jamar Clark, Philando Castile, Winston Smith, Dante Wright, Thurman Blevins, Travis Jordan, and George Floyd. It's a lot of people. Okay. Levy Armstrong said, "This is what I would call the anatomy of a cover-up," she told reporters after interrupting the police chief and stepping in front of her lectern. "This is unacceptable. I'm sorry, it is. When I agreed to work with you on the work group, we talked about the importance of transparency and accountability, and here what we are seeing is business as usual." Levy Armstrong publicly voiced her frustration with Huffman and Mayor Frey, who was reelected in November, even after the police murder of George Floyd and the civil unrest that followed under his leadership, talking about the mayor. So she shared the empathy she felt as a mother of Black children with Locke's grieving family. She said, "As a mom, that could have easily been my son. How dare they?" And then they try to manipulate the public because he had a gun. So no, that's not acceptable. So here's the thing. He's 22 years old, which means that he can legally own a gun. You can legally own a gun when you're 18, right? So he was a legal gun owner. He obtained his gun legally, and a lot of these people, that's their fear. They a lot of these right wingers, they fear that people are going to break into their house and kill them. How many times has that happened to these people? Probably not a lot. Because trust me, if it was happening a lot, we'd know about it. We would definitely know about it. If there was a wave of people in their homes, people breaking in and, killing people in their sleep, we'd know about it because the news would never stop reporting it. But when the police do it, it's just like, yeah, well, what are you going to do? They had a warrant. They had a no-knock warrant. Here's something interesting I found. And by interesting, I mean horrifying. So this was from, this is actually in Wikipedia, because Wikipedia had an entire entry on no-knock warrants, because I was looking to find out how effective are these no-knock warrants, right? And I guess the whole thing behind no-knock warrants, if you ever watched the movie Goodfellas with Ray Liotta, like, the cops are announcing that they're coming in, and then, Ray Liotta's wife in the movie is like dumping drugs in the toilet. They're trying to get rid of the evidence. So I guess they figure if there's a no-knock warrant, they can come in and catch everybody by surprise before they can get rid of the contraband, or before they could jump out of a window and run. I guess that's the science behind a no-knock warrant. I wouldn't know. Never been part of a no-knock warrant. But in Wikipedia, I'm so sorry, I'm old. In Wikipedia, they talked about the Breonna Taylor case, right? I guess this case is still too new to add to that no-knock warrant thing. But they also have a section called Other Examples. And these other examples, I'm going to read a few of these. I'm not going to read them all because it's a lot of reading. But I'm going to read some of these. And I want you to get a sense of the tragedies that happen with these no-knock warrants. Okay? In 1999, Ismail Mena was shot and killed by SWAT team officers in Denver, Colorado, who were performing a no-knock raid that was approved by a judge acting on false information contained in the search warrant. The police believed there to be drugs in the house, but no drugs were found on premises. And it was later revealed that the address given to SWAT by Officer Joseph Beanie was the wrong one. Jefferson County District Attorney Dave Thomas investigated the matter and cleared the officers involved with the raid on the grounds that Mena had pointed a gun and fired it at SWAT officers, although who fired first remains in dispute. However, many have objected to the investigation's findings due to inconsistencies in the various officers' accounts of what happened. The ACLU and others have objected to the Denver Police Department's request for a no-knock raid and the judge's decision to allow such a raid. Okay. Here's another one. 2 former Los Angeles Police Department officers, along with 13 others, have pled guilty to running a robbery ring from 1999 to 2001, which used fake no-knock raids as a ruse to catch victims off guard. The defendants would then steal cash and drugs to sell on the street. Here's another one. Katherine Johnson was a 92-year-old Atlanta, Georgia woman killed by 3 undercover police officers during a no-knock raid on November 21st of 2006. Assuming her home was being invaded, Johnson fired 1 shot through the front door, which went over the officers' heads. Police fired 39 shots in response, 5 of which hit Johnson, and some of which also hit the officers in an incident of friendly fire. Now, here's the thing. If you're on the other side of the door, how in the hell do you do friendly fire? And here's the thing. You have a 92-year-old woman who's strapped and shooting through her front door because she's scared because the cops are coming in. I don't know. That's kind of wild. The 92-year-old has a wherewithal to pull her heater and start shooting at intruders. Now, unfortunately, and let me see here. Let me see. One officer was later convicted for planting 3 bags of marijuana in the home. Officers were also convicted on charges of manslaughter, making false statements, and conspiracy to violate the civil rights, resulting in death. So at least there was some justice there. Here's another one. Tracy Engel was shot in his house 5 times during a no-knock raid in North Little Rock, Arkansas in January of 2008. After the police entered the house, Tracy thought armed robbers had entered the house and intended to scare them away with a non-working gun. The police expected to find drugs, but none were found. He was brought to the intensive care, but police removed him from intensive care for questioning, after which they arrested him and charged him with assault on the officers who shot him. Remember, his gun is a non-working gun. So how could they charge him with assault? One more. In 2008, a SWAT team from Prince George's County, Maryland, conducted a raid at the home of Berwyn Heights resident Che Calvo after a package of marijuana was mailed to his house. Both of his dogs were shot during the raid, and it was later determined that he had no involvement with the package that was sent. Police learned after entering the home and killing the dogs that Calvo was the mayor of Berwyn Heights, Maryland. So these guys invaded the home of the mayor and killed his dogs. There's more here, so you could read it on the Wikipedia page under where it says under examples. There's a lot more. I'm not gonna read them all, but you've got to be fucking kidding me with these no-knock warrants. So Breonna Taylor's was high profile because, you know, of all the protests, but there are so many examples of these no-knock warrants going wrong. And you can't really find any stats on how effective these are. Are they really catching people out there with these no-knock warrants, or is it just an excuse to go in and use all that military gear that they get? So you figure they give cops all this military gear. Blue, you remember the little girl that got killed at the Burlington Coat Factory last Christmas?
I do.
Did you get a chance to watch that video?
I did. Hot fucking mess. It looked like they broke every training rule in the world.
Basically, I mean, they came in ready to shoot. So they were like, you know, I think what they said, like diamond formation, and they were just playing army out there. And they ended up killing someone by accident.
It was very reminiscent of when I play Call of Duty.
Exactly. You are exactly right. These no-knock warrants do not work. It's not worth all the people who get killed over them. Now, here's the thing, right? I want you to bear with me on this because you've probably heard me say this before, but I'm going to say it again, okay? Stop worrying about national elections. I know I'm big on national elections, right? I vote in all my national elections, but I'm at my wit's end with national elections. It doesn't really matter anymore. Okay? The Democrats proved that by gaining power and then doing nothing. Worry about your local elections. Find out who appoints these people and hold them accountable. So for the last few years of our democracy, for the last 10 months of our democracy, let's participate in a way that will help us sleep at night. Okay? You know how Donald Trump is going to end democracy, right? You know how he's going to accomplish that? By putting people in at the local level who's going to support his horseshit. By putting in the electors, by putting in his own judges, by putting in people who are going to rubber stamp him. And next time around, he's not going to be so ham-fisted about it. Next time, he's gonna probably learn from his mistakes. I mean, if he learned from his mistakes, he wouldn't have went bankrupt 6 times. Maybe twice at the most. But let's just say Donald Trump doesn't make it. Let's say somebody like Mike Pence makes it. Oh, let's say somebody like Ron DeSantis makes it. someone who actually has two brain cells to rub together. And they have all the people on the local level set to just hand them the election, to just void out the election. So we got to make sure that we get our people in, or at least take their people out. Here's some homework for you guys, okay? Don't worry, you're not being graded on this. This is just for your own, knowledge. Find out who both of your senators are for your state, okay? Find out which U.S. House member represents your district, okay? Find out who the chief of police is in your town. And then find out if that chief of police is elected or appointed. And if they're appointed, find out who appoints them. Find out who your city council members are, and then find out what their agenda is for 2022. And last but not least, more importantly, find out who your Secretary of State is. Remember how Brian Kemp was able to steal the election from Stacey Abrams? He was Secretary of State. So he presided over all of these, over the voter rolls. He was able to purge Democratic voters from the rolls because he was Secretary of State. So once he was running, he should have recused himself, but he didn't do that because he had to make sure that the fix was in. These are the people you got to worry about. Joe Biden can kick rocks. Donald Trump can kick rocks. Yay, Donald Trump tried to end democracy. Blah, 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 yakety smackety. Oh, I'm sorry. The good guys are in town. What are they doing? Nothing. Worry about your local elections. Let's clean up our own backyards here. So this way we don't have any more Breonna Taylors. We don't have any more Amir Locks. Look what happened in Ferguson after Michael Brown. People got involved in local politics. And they got out the people who were making their lives miserable. We need that exodus across the country. Don't let Barack Obama come out there from, he's parasailing with Richard Branson to show up in your neighborhood, talk about, gotta vote like our democracy depends on it. Hey, Barack, shut your fucking face. Because where were you when Joe Manchin was pretty much destroying our democracy? Getting a reach around from Richard Branson? Shut the fuck up, Barack. Then he's going to put his wife out there, because people like her and shit, to tell people, you got to go out there and vote. Hey, why didn't you make it easier for people to vote? No, fuck all that bullshit. We've played that game for too long. Vote in your local elections, do your homework, study up, find out who is the people that are making the decisions that affect you directly, and let's clean up our own backyards here. Because the Republicans are going to do whatever they need to do to win. Blue, did you see that story that that Mercedes posted about the voter registrations in Florida that are being switched?
Yo, that shit's mad crazy. I hope they figure it to be fraud, and they do what they need to do to get them fraudsters. That governor's something else. He reminds me of a baby Trump.
Well, basically that's his whole style. His whole style is baby Trump. He figures Trump gets all this adulation. I'm going to emulate Trump and get some of that shine. And for the most part, it works. His people love him, but he has to realize, there's a cost to this thing. But he's trying to get out of paying that cost by, flipping the script, by getting the voter rolls on his side. So for all those who didn't see the story, there were people who were going up to, and at least the news story I saw, they were going up to people who didn't really speak English all that well, elderly folks who don't, and they were telling them, hey, you need to update your voter registration. Now, unless you move, there's no need to update your voter registration. Once you're on the rolls, you're on the rolls. You don't have to update anything. But what these people were doing was they were re-registering these people, and then they were switching their party affiliation from Republican to from Democrat to Republican. Now, here's the thing. In the general election, it won't matter. You could still vote for whoever you want to. But Florida is a closed primary state. Now, I live in North Carolina. Me and Blue, we live in NC. North Carolina is an open primary state, which means that I can vote for whoever I want to in the primary. So I'm an independent. So basically, they give me an independent ballot, and then I just fill it out. But I could vote for whoever I want to in the primaries because we're open primary state. Florida, New York, they're closed primary states. So you can only vote. So if there's a Republican voting in the primary, only Republicans can vote in that primary. So by icing out all these Democrats and switching them over to Republican, that means these people can't vote in Democratic primaries if they're switched over to Republican. And especially if they didn't figure it out until they get to go vote and then they find out, oh, they're registered as a Republican. Don't mind my yawning, I'm old. So basically, just make sure you are doing your homework. Finding out who's making all these laws and all these rules that are affecting your life. And make sure you do something about it. Because like I said, these national elections, and I know people are going to disagree with me, and people are going to be like, you know what, Merc, that's irresponsible to tell people not to vote for president, not to vote for Congress. Ask yourself a question over the last year. Has it mattered? Putting Joe Biden in office, putting the Democrats in power, has it mattered? Has anything fundamentally changed in the last year? And I'm not talking about, even getting past stuff that Joe Biden could just do by executive order. Has anything changed? Or better yet, has anything changed for the better? No. Get into your local elections and let's just end this stupid horseshit already. It's absolutely ridiculous. There's also one more thing I want you guys to do before we wrap up. I'm trying to, and I'm probably going to talk about this on the Sunday show with Odie and Mercedes and Blue if he's up. I want to try to talk about some figures in Black history, because it is Black History Month, that you've never heard of before. And I found somebody who was very interesting, and I want to find out more about her, and I'll talk about her on Sunday, because I kind of caught wind of her on a Facebook post. And I'm like, I've never heard of this woman. So I want to find out more about her and then talk about her on Sunday. But, your homework, don't worry, you're not being rated on it. Find out somebody from Black history that you've never heard of before, or maybe somebody you heard of in passing and just never really took a look at it. Look them up on Wikipedia. Look them up on Encyclopedia Britannica. I'm pretty sure there's an online version of it, and find out a little bit more about Black history. How many times can we do book reports on George Washington and Carver? There's a wealth of people out there that we need to learn about, and a wealth of events that we need to learn about. My sister said that she was kind of ashamed that she only heard about the Black Wall Street only a few years ago. I'm like, there are some people who didn't know about Black Wall Street until they saw it on Watchmen. And then they looked it up and they were like, that can't be real. Oh my God, it's real. So yeah, gotta dig a little bit deeper. So, and that's pretty much all I had. I have one more quick thing before we wrap up. We're gonna wrap up in a couple minutes, but Texas had another ice storm. Now, it wasn't as bad as it was last year, right? Greg Abbott reported that about 70,000 people lost power, which is a marked improvement over last year, where I think 4 or 5 million people lost power. So 70,000, not that bad for a state that has about a little under 30 million people in it. But here's the part where Greg Abbott gets heat, right? Texas bypasses regulations by making sure that their power lines do not extend past their state. Because if their power lines extend past their state, they are subject to federal regulation. So they keep all of their power lines inside state lines so that they do not have to be regulated by the feds, right? Regulation basically means they got to put money into their systems to keep everything running, right? Now, look at it like this, okay? Most of Texas is powered by natural gas. In Texas, they pay people like Greg Abbott to make sure that they are not listed as a necessary public utility, even though they are. But if they are, then they'd be subject to state regulations. And because they stay outside of those lines, they're not listed as, they're not listed as such. So because of that, basically, they don't have to do with regulations. And these people have given Greg Abbott over $1 million in campaign contributions. So maybe if these people were following some sort of regulations, maybe those 70,000 people wouldn't have gotten without power. Who knows? So marked improvement over last year, but because Texas is so corrupt, it's still worth noting that, yeah, they could have done more. And that they were just lucky there was only 70,000 people without power and not 5 million people again like the last time. And let's also note something here for all you global warming deniers. So Texas gets 2 ice storms 2 years in a row. It's called a pattern. Once is an anomaly, twice, pattern. So you may not believe in global warming, but global warming believes in you. So, Mr. Blue, what are your final thoughts? Oh, I think you're on mute.
What'd you say?
What are your final thoughts?
I'm at a loss of words, Merc. Let's think about to the first time we did this, right?
Mm-hmm.
No disrespect to you and your research, because it's phenomenal, but we're basically saying the same thing over and over and over again as it pertains to POLI-TRICKS. Black people getting killed stupidly. Politicians fucking us over and not doing nothing in our best interest. You telling them not to vote. Me telling them to vote. This is almost like this is a video game and we keep getting reset somehow, but it's a different version every time. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. It's kind of like when you play a game like Borderlands or Diablo, and you have like all these different versions of the same character. You may have
I have like 3 or 4 Borderlands games. I've never played it.
Really? I love Borderlands.
I want to. I just don't have the time.
Yeah. Trust me. Especially Borderlands 3, it will eat up your time for sure. Yeah.
But when I find a good deal, I just get it. Hey, I might as well add it to the collection of unopened games.
I do that on Steam. I got like a bunch of games on Steam because sometimes they're like, oh yeah, here's this game that was $60 last year. Now it's on sale for $7. Oh, fine, I'll buy it, and then never have time to play it.
I think the only game I got on Steam might be GTA 5.
You know what? I couldn't get into it. I ended up giving it to when I went home, I ended up giving it to my brother.
I like anything when you slapping a bitch and saying, suck my dick, bitch. Black. And I love when you're in the car and you steal cars. I love that shit. And you listening, you jamming out the music. You know what I'm saying? Yes. As far as, doing the missions, fuck the missions. I just like living vicariously through my characters.
And don't get me wrong. People have so much fun with that game. Like people make videos, and I think with GTA 5, you could mod the game So people have all these crazy mods and stuff like that. So
yeah, I seen this one, right? He was like, he moved in with his girlfriend, or his girlfriend moved in with him. And I guess, they went to bed and she wake up and then she's cooking breakfast. He wakes up, I smell breakfast. Oh, my baby cooking breakfast for me. And then she turned around and she ain't got no makeup on. He didn't recognize her. He's tripped out, boy. He said, who the fuck is this bitch? Where my bitch at? Hey, Leslie, come get this motherfucker. It was crazy. It was crazy. If I find it, I'm going to share it to you. You're going to laugh your ass off, man.
definitely.
All right. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Urban Breakdown podcast featuring hit shows such as POLI-TRICKS with Mercer Prescott and his band of eclectic cronies, as well as 360 Degrees with Odie, Merc, and Sin. And maybe I'll pop my head in again. Maybe. The Sundays, though, they rough, boy. Be well, be great. And don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to the Urban Breakdown podcast, streaming on all podcast aggregators. That's Spotify, YouTube, TuneIn, Apple Music, Google Music, everywhere. Wherever you could think to listen to a podcast or watch a podcast, there we are. Be well, be great.